session is SharePoint Hybrid right for you? My name is Fabian Williams, and just a little bit more about me. I'm a Microsoft certified system developer, database administrator, systems engineer. I work for a company called Planet Technologies in Washington, D.C. metro area on the federal team. I blog quite often at fabiangwilliams.com, and typically my blog posts are usually on BCS, workflows. Of recently, it's been in hybrid and mobile. I'm like all in on mobile. If anyone here follow me on Twitter? A couple of you guys, so you guys know I tweet way too much. And it's typically either working or the pub, working in the pub and stuff like that. You can connect with me on LinkedIn here that you see right there. And my email is there because I encourage you guys to email me about stuff. I answer every question that I get, even if it's to say I don't know the answer, someone else does, or heads down right now, let me get back to you. The only one qualifier I tell people is remember, just like you, I have a full-time job. It may take me a little time to get to you, and unless you're willing to share with me your bill code and your charge code so I can bill for that project, give me a little bit of time, but I will always get back to you. I want to make sure that you guys have some objectives so that at the end of the session you can check off a list and say, yep, that's exactly what we did. So a couple of things for you. I want you to leave here with an understanding of what SharePoint Hybrid is suitable for. The reason why I have this here, it may even seem simplistic, but it's not. Hybrid can mean so many things to so many different people. There's hybrid in terms of the technology, in terms of the infrastructure. There's hybrid in terms of apps. Depending on what conversation you're having, hybrid could just mean so many different things. So I want to narrow that down so we can walk away with something. Next thing is that once you know if hybrid is suitable for something, I want us to understand how do you plan for hybrid. Many times, this is usually the one that kills people because people go into there with the illusion that it's just click, 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 done. In fact, it's not even that simple, but there's so many things that can come in play during a hybrid deployment that can just totally knock you out of the water. There's so many dependencies. In fact, the largest challenge I had for this session is how do I talk about hybrid in 50 minutes, right? In fact, in Ignite, I'm doing a pre-con, which is an all-day pre-con, and that in and of itself, we had to even trim some time on there. But the one good thing I'm going to tell you is that this session is, you know how you have like, you have Star Wars and then you have the ones that come before? This session is somewhat is a prequel, right? So this is almost like a prequel to stuff that I've done before. I've delivered a hybrid session for SharePoint Conference and TechEd for the last 2 years, where I started off the conversation showing them how to do hybrid. I've never had a conversation about why you do hybrid and how do you get to the point where you can do that. So this is what that session is about. It's all the things that I did that were behind the scenes that people did not see. All right. The benefit of that is that all the stuff that I've done previously is on Channel 9. If you just go to channel 9 at msdn.com or go to my website, I usually have blog posts and also snippets as well. You can see all of that part. So this will actually just marry the two of them together. Next thing is to learn how to configure SharePoint on premises and also SharePoint Online. If I say SPO, it means SharePoint Online for hybrid scenario. For some of this, I'm going to be showing you a video. Again, the challenge was how do I capture this in 50 minutes? So rather than just sitting here and typing and making mistakes, I recorded some of this for you. And the recording is also available as well. And also learn the better, not really best. There's no such thing as best practice. There's a better practice because it's always evolving around configuring the environment to be the specific business needs. Hybrid, again, is different for everyone. And because it's different for everyone, it's not going to be the same every time. In fact, out of the 4 times that I've done my hybrid presentation, I think maybe twice it's exactly the same. And this is even me doing it for a lab. And also the best practice around managing identity across a hybrid environment. This right here is probably the most pivotal. If you walk away with nothing else, this is the most important thing in hybrid, identity. May seem simple, but it is. Think about it. In hybrid, both farms have an identity that needs to communicate with each other. That's one, all right? So the infrastructure itself has an identity. The service application that lives on top of that and all the applications that you're trying to make hybrid, they have an identity as well, right? Because they sit on a farm. They belong within that infrastructure. And the individuals that are using it, they also have an identity as well. All of these need to be harmonious. They need to all talk together and they need to be seamless because in the end, the experience that the end user should have is that they should not know that they're in a hybrid environment. It should just come natural to them, right? And it does if set up properly. So these are those are the objectives. These are some of the takeaways and qualifiers that I have for you here today, all right? So if you've done hybrid before, I've had two people that raised their hands. If you go out on Microsoft and you try to find guidance in terms of hybrid, you're going to go to a couple different places, and in the end, you may end up on a TechNet MSDN website that has some videos and it has some different scenarios of how to go through that hybrid situation. And they have screenshots and they have code snippets, and they say that you can usually take that and cut and paste and make it work. Maybe 2 years ago that was true. Right? It has not been updated in quite some time, and since then, the cadence of how Office 365 changes, and also different methods in terms of how Azure is building have caused some of that information to be dated. So I have a GitHub site, and I have some gist on my GitHub, which are all of my PowerShell scripts that I've used to make mine work, and I've explained where the differences are in terms of what's on MSDN and what's on my site. So use them both at your leisure. SharePoint Hybrid Sessions, as I said, I've delivered at TechEd and at SPC. If this link right there will actually take you to my name as a speaker, and it'll show you all of the ones, and you can just go through those. That's going to be good 55 minutes of your life well spent if you have nothing better to do except learn about hybrid. But that's all the nuts and bolts, and it gives you all the videos of everything right here that I'm doing. So for the session flow, in fact, before we even do that, we're here. It's like a little bit in the afternoon. That sugar rush may be kicking in pretty soon. The one thing I want to get is I speak very fast, and sometimes I don't know I'm doing it, byproduct of being Jamaican. So if I do speak too fast, just raise your hand up and say slow down, or ask me to repeat it. If you have questions while I'm talking, ask me then and there. Don't let it go past, because if you don't grasp one thing, it's going to be hard to pick it up back in the end. So stop me and ask me then, and I'll answer it as best as my ability. If it's something I want to table to the end because it's a larger conversation, we'll certainly do that as well. But this is just to keep us on task in terms of what our session is going to look like. What is hybrid? Planning for hybrid. My demos are either going to be me showing you something inside a Word document, or the videos, as I mentioned before. Preparing for on-premises, looking at what the prep looks like, talking about identity, talking about setting up federation, the federated user, and also lessons learned in the end. And while the video is playing, I'll stop and I'll talk about it. Again, the video is just make sure I can hit my 50-minute mark and have time for you to ask questions. But quite simply, any questions so far? None? All right, cool. All right. Quite simply, what hybrid is just a combination between SharePoint on-premises and SharePoint online, if you're supposed to diagram this out. But if you're looking for something that gives you a nice definition, this is probably what it would look like. And what I have inside red is the pieces that I'd ask you to concentrate on. Enables identity management and trusted communication. And it may seem simple, but the trusted communication is the one that sometimes can get you as well. Trusted means there's a certificate there somewhere that makes it trustful, right? And there's many certificates in a SharePoint hybrid situation, right? Actually, many meaning there's 3, but it's more than 1. And they're very difficult to manipulate sometimes. Configure integrated functionality between services. The one that are usually emphasized is Search and BCS. There's also SAP, which is Duet. And there's also conversations about having BizTalk in that as well. This piece of it right here, the search is probably the lowest hanging fruit. And if you're considering doing something in hybrid and you want to peel proof of concept something out, I would definitely recommend search, because it's the biggest bang for the buck. The ability to be able to search in both environments and search information as if you're in one place. Okay? So in terms of topologies, you're going to see 3 here. In fact, let me just bring up all 3 if you look at it while I speak to these points. The first thing I want to emphasize is that when you're speaking about hybrid, and people say, people are talking about the topologies in hybrid or the direction in hybrid, the one thing you must understand is that the direction isn't always in the context of the on-premises server. So when they say one-way outbound, it's talking about the SharePoint on-premises server connecting to information inside the SharePoint online environment. That right there is probably the easiest hybrid to set up. When I mean easiest, I mean relative to one-way inbound, which is SharePoint's online resource trying to get information from an on-premises environment. And the trick usually there is in the last part of that image where it says reverse proxy device. Because think about it. If it's one-way inbound, you control that LAN environment. You know who your users are. Remember we talked about identity, right? So it's your farm. These are your users. They're inside your AD. They need to log in before they can do anything, right? So they're trying to get outside. So the barriers to entry is just get outside of your firewall and go out, right? So you're going to somewhere else. Think about it from the opposite side, right? If you have something on premises and you're trying to allow somebody to come inside, first question is, how do I validate who is who, right? Anybody that knows that URI or that URL can come knocking at that door. So you need to have a device in front to be able to say, hey, who are you? Are you allowed access? Now, when I say, hey, who are you? Are you allowed access? Again, in the context of what, right? The user is going to be logging in and saying, it's me, right? But also, there's the applications behind the scene. I'm trying to do search, right? And search is trying to say, you know what, I want to give this user a unique experience. So I'm going to take search results from here and put them inside a result set, and it's going to look all nice and pretty. So now the application is also saying, I want to do stuff, right? So there's so many different little things that need to happen in place for it to know who you are before you can do anything. And two-way, which is bidirectional, that means it's doing both outbound and inbound. I usually tell people, unless there's a strategic or a real reason why you don't want to if you're doing one-way inbound, if there's not a strategic reasons why you don't want to do outbound, do it anyway, because you've already solved that problem, right? Even if it's just to do two-way search, as I mentioned before, the lowest hanging fruit, do it anyway, because you've already jumped that hurdle. All right, so bear that in mind in terms of just the topologies. These are the only ones that are there. All right. Why consider hybrid? So, and this is what this entire session is about. Usually, what I see is that it's the company's entry point into the cloud. And in the entry point could be looking at a couple different scenarios. One, you're a large enterprise organization, and what comes with it is usually bureaucracy, policies, methodologies, procedures, and they're not quick to move. They can't think left or think right real quickly. They, on task, on project. So in terms of saying, okay, we want to now have a cloud strategy, or we want to now enable people to do something in the cloud, it's not easy for them to say, all this money that we put inside our on-premises stuff, let's either get rid of it, or how do we augment it? Or how do we put something outside there? Hybrid could be a possible solution for that. Conversely, it could be a small company. Any one of you here that are maybe independent consultants, and or a small mom and shop trying to gain a foothold into an industry, could say, you know what, I don't have the capital to go out and buy X server, Y server, this amount of information, this amount of licenses, right? I also don't have the money to buy the staff to maintain all of these different disciplines in terms of, knowing SharePoint, knowing LAN, knowing, all the things that you need to do to have this presence to be able to do business. By doing a situation like this where you could go out and say, you know what, I have my, my little small business server tucked away here, or I have my Salesforce.com, I have my whatever little online things that you're using that gives you the ability to do business, you can plug that into Office 365 and get a hybrid topology that way. So it's an entry point, whether you're large or whether you're small. Provide access to workers, partners, and customers. I fall into this category. I've been working for my company for 3 years and 6 months. I've set foot inside that building maybe 4 times in my life since I've worked for them. Because I'm a developer, I'm billed out to customers, right? And typically, I go out, I meet customers, we have requirements analysis, JAD sessions, and they tell me what they want. I write it up, sign it, and I go back to my home and I work. They see me again for Q&A and deployment, and that's about it. And I don't go to the office unless there's a company event. However, coupled with that is the fact that, as I mentioned, I work in the federal space. So when I go onto a site, there's even some places where they say, sir, leave that phone, leave that computer inside your car. You can't bring it on a federal installation. So I can't, my corporate laptop, I can't bring in, so I don't have access to that information. Or even when I go inside and they issue me a device, I can't use that device to get back into my system because it is protected. However, if I had a URL that I could go to, like on office365.com, and that is tied back into my on-premises environment, it's over port 443, it's HTTPS, it's just like doing online banking. So that gives me that ability. So the access to workers and partners, this is where that could come in as well. So if you're trying to, the way Microsoft uses this, think about it. How many people are here are going to Ignite? No one's going to Ignite. A couple of people are going to Ignite. So the registration process for Microsoft conferences, even here, when they do European conferences or the TechEd Europe, when they invite you to register, part of the registration process is asking for your live ID. It's also tying back into their system. They, for a period of time, extend their world outside so that when you're registered, it can capture that information and give you that experience that you belong, and Microsoft internal can make magic of what information they're capturing from you to make the experience even better. So they themselves drink their own Kool-Aid. The other part, which is really cool, and as I mentioned before, is to migrate teams iteratively to SharePoint Online. While you're maintaining on-premises. Again, and I want to emphasize this, when people say hybrid, and you'll see in a couple more slides down, people sometimes will think it's a migration. You're trying to move from one area to the next. Not true. You can maintain a hybrid environment forever because there may be reasons why you can't either commit to one or the other. One, you need to be agile. You need to get out into the cloud. Two, you can't go fully into the cloud because of either contractual regulation or it could be within the country that you're in prohibitive to having some content in the cloud. So you have that as well. So I'm trying to catch up with my train of thought here. Migrate iteratively. All right, and also. If you think about it from a Microsoft services standpoint, Microsoft is not in the business of doing services, right? So you have Delve and Office Graph, you have Yammer, you have OneDrive for Business. These are not going on premises, right? These are going to be inside the cloud. If you're trying to have a relationship with Microsoft within your organization to make sense of this data where some of it lives in the cloud and will always live in the cloud and some of it is on premises and you're trying to get that meaningful experience, then it puts you in a position where you need to have a hybrid to be able to communicate that well. It may always be that way because you can do REST endpoints and OData to pull that information in and action it that way, but it's easier if it was and more seamless if you're doing it through a hybrid situation. And this goes back to what I said before, the complexity and regulation may prohibit you from leaving on premises. So what you would do in this case is that you may say, I'm going to keep X data on premises. However, I'm going to surface it in terms of like a web service, like what you do in terms of BCS, and then I'm going to consume it in an external list, and through BCS on SharePoint Online, I'm going to allow people to go online and be able to consume data that lives physically inside on-premises, so you're being compliant. So that's there as well. Extend reach and temporary access. This is another, it goes back to the Microsoft argument I made before in terms of conferences, but more so ramping up and ramping out. And especially for me, when I go to customers, when I proof of concept stuff, this is usually what I do. Gone are the days. In fact, I don't want to move this because may jerk the connector, but I don't know how many of you guys used to walk around with that big backpack with the hunker of a laptop inside there because you need to have an on-premises system with you at all time. Right? I used to do that a lot. Pure back. You know what I walk around now with? A MacBook Pro. Right? Lightest computer ever. I have Parallels, I have my VM, and I just go out to Azure and I spin up environments as I need to be. And in doing so, if I'm doing stuff for customers, the first thing I'll tell them, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, you can go to azure.com and sign up and get X amount of credits to try this out. What I'm going to do for you is you go out and get it, give me your credentials. I'm going to build you this stuff. And it's either going to work in the cloud, which give them that cloud experience, or I can even do something hybrid and show you how you can tie back inside there. So again, Microsoft is doing this mobile first, cloud first. And your customers, it would benefit your customers if you treat them in that way as well. Whenever I build or talk to my customers about solution, even if I'm building something for them on premises, I build it cloud aware so that if there is a change, if it works in the cloud, it'll work on premises. And if they need to move, if they need to shift and go say, okay, no, now we want to go to the cloud, it's already cloud ready. No refactoring, no changing of what I've built for them. So I usually lead that way. Hybrid isn't static, all right? I'm just going to bring these three up because there's three things I want to talk to. And it just, again, reemphasizes a little bit of what I said before. Question?
Can I just clarify something?
Please.
When you talk about clouds for SharePoint, you're talking SharePoint Online, Office 365, not an on-prem version of SharePoint installed on an dedicated Azure server?
Yes and no, or it depends. The right consultant answer for that. The answer, it could be either one. What I've done, in fact, I have one customer right now that they want their SharePoint What's the better word? I'm trying to make sure, because I know where you're going with this. They want their SharePoint on premises to be hosted in Azure, all right?
We're looking to go to the cloud.
Exactly.
We're thinking, do we go with the on-prem version on Azure servers,
Right.
or do we go with SharePoint Online?
Great question. I'm going to take 2 minutes to answer that because it's going to loop back into the narrative that I'm talking about. Besides Azure, there are other options like a rack space or like a FP web or stuff like that. So I want to make sure everyone understands. I'm not just saying you need to put it inside Azure. If you do a rack space, and I don't know what their pricing models are, so I can't speak to that. But the distinction I'm going to make here is that if you go into Azure, there's compute costs, there's storage costs, there's transaction costs. Exactly. With FP Web or Rackspace, their model is not that granular, if you will. However, what Microsoft gives you is that you can scale stuff up and scale stuff down within the same day, and you're charged only for usage. So 61 half a dozen in the other. I've done them both ways, right? And when I'm speaking about on-premises experience, he's right. The on-premises could be inside your facility, HQ, tucked away in a server room that you have to walk in and get access to. It could be a hosted solution by a Rackspace or an FP Web, or it could be your own VMs inside Azure. The key difference is, and it may seem oversimplistic, but if you just understand this part, it makes perfect sense, is you can put your own code on your own servers. Right? You have access to beyond the site collection because what Microsoft gives you is from site collection and below, right? You can't do anything with a web application. You can't do that much with the service applications. They're giving it to you, and it's in a tenant. The distinction is that whether you're in a rack space or whether you're your own Azure VM, you can go beyond that, right? So that's the key. But does that answer your question?
Yeah, just to hijack it one more.
Mm-hmm.
Do you get the feeling that people are taking the hit and taking the compromise and going to fully hosted SharePoint Online because it's easier, or are they still trying to put it on their own servers, wherever those servers happen to be, because it gives them more control? Which way is it going?
From my experience in the States, again, that's the only way I can qualify it, is that people are more apt to put it inside Microsoft Azure for the purposes that they can scale up and scale down. It's already in their ecosystem. Their nines in terms of how much you're giving in their SLA it keeps growing, and every time Scott Gould comes up and talk about Azure, everyone's like raving. In fact, build next week, there's going to be some really good stuff coming out, and the entire experience of Microsoft Cloud is just getting better and cheaper, so it might as well just go that route. You're welcome. So getting back to this, federated users, right? So flexible and mobile. As you'll see, as I'm going to do a demo later, and I talk about identity, you'll see that the users play an important role. You also want, and how you manage those users. You also want to reduce your burden on internal IT. It goes back to this gentleman's question here in terms of what people want to do. A key decision by a company may be that, IT is a cost center. We want to reduce the cost center. IT doesn't really bring revenue. They support people, right? So it costs them money. So if we can give this piece of business to Microsoft and use their service level agreements to say that you need to do this, otherwise pay us back money or whatever, or we trust you because you have these many nines, they're pushing it that way, or to a Rackspace or to an FP Web. And then have IT basically say, you're in charge of just making sure businesses run properly. And it also allows you to grow at your own pace. As I mentioned before, the example, put your toe into the water just a little bit to figure out. In fact, I would encourage anybody who's thinking about hybrid to do the free piece first. If for no other reason, then get that A7 server, put the SSD disk on there, get your SQL Server get the best IOPS possible. Because it's free then. You're going to burn through credits, so it's technically not really free. You may get it for 3 days rather than 3 months. But the idea is that you will now have metrics because Microsoft, at the end of the cycle, will tell you every day your burn rate is this. And you can then take that and figure out how much it's going to cost you relatively if you're supposed to run it there. So when people usually tell me, okay, I want to do this, but how much is it going to cost me? My answer is, I really don't know. But we can build something like it, and you can try it out for free, and then at the end of the month, you have an Excel spreadsheet you can make a determination on. So that allows you to grow at your own pace. All right. So the first place that I would point people to is this site right here. You don't need to worry about capturing this URL. And in fact, the bottom piece of the URL is cut off on the monitor, but in my slide deck, which is going to be there, you'll get it. But there's a hybrid worksheet that's out there on Microsoft that I encourage everyone to pull down. And we will actually go through that worksheet, not in detail, but I want to call out certain blocks. And remember I said planning is key. We're going to see why planning is key there. My very good friend and mentor, Bill Baer, has a tool which I believe is in phase 2 now in terms of what it does. It's a tool that you can install as an app, and it basically asks you interviewing questions about your environment, and in the end, it gives you a risk level in terms of telling you whether or not, or how much of what you have right now can be moved into hybrid, and mitigation steps as to what to do to get you fully in that level. All right, so it'll ask you questions about whether or not what's functional level is your Active Directory, about your users in terms of whether you're forest, single domains, multi-forest, multi-domain, and stuff like that, whether you're using ADFS, all of these questions about the key things that I told you that are important, and then give you a risk strategy around that. All right, so let's take a look right now. Let's jump out of here and take a look at this document here, which is actually the planning worksheet. But while I have it populated, and when you see some of the videos that I have, this will make more sense in terms of my value. And just as an aside, and just to put some context to your question as well, the reason why I'm not doing, besides the time factor of 50 minutes, which is really hard to do hybrid, TechEd last year, I had to do a hybrid session. And I typically try to get sponsors to sponsor my on-premises environment for my hybrid because it is expensive. But I didn't get it. So I have an MSDN subscription through my MVP. I get $150 per month credit that I can use. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do it this way. So I stood up, and you'll see it later in terms of the diagram and the videos. I think five servers. It ended up being 7 in the end because I put some more boxes out there. And the trick and the challenge sometimes with hybrid is that you cannot, especially in Azure, you cannot turn off your SharePoint environment to save some money if you have a hybrid scenario out there, because search, especially if search is integrated, search is looking to see something and it's not going to be there, and search service application is just going to crash. And you can't bring it back up. It's going to say the search service host is unavailable. There's no way to restart it back. You have to kill your service application and pull it back on. So that's just something that I found. I've commented to people about it, but they say, you know what, well, leave your server on, all right? But that's for me. It wasn't a production environment. I didn't have that luxury. However, because I knew this and I didn't want the hiccup to happen again, I left my servers on 7 servers for 4 days, and I ended up, after I finished, burned through my 150, and I ended up paying $425 in fees for 4 days of having 7 servers on for a hybrid. So you can do some of the calculation there. So in here, I did a video because I can't keep spinning it up and off because it's gonna murder me in terms of just bill. And Microsoft doesn't ask you for this money. You give them a credit card and they take that money. All right. So there's no conversation. It just comes out. All right. So in terms of and you can all see this, right? Yes, global administrator. Right. So as we work through this worksheet, I want you to concentrate on the header. So in terms of user accounts, these are some of the things that you look at. You're gonna need to have access or availability to the person who has the global administrator account in Office 365. Remember I said about planning? If you don't have this, or you're not this person, and that person really says, I'm not giving you this information because of our security policy, hybrid is not going to work for you, all right? You're going to need to have the AD, the Active Directory domain admin, and also the enterprise admin account at some point in time, right? So access to it, or you're the person doing it, or you need to get somebody to do it for you. Why, you may ask? Because you're doing PowerShell scripts to bind your AD environment to Office 365, and you're going to need that account to be able to do that, all right? So, and the SharePoint administrator, you are working within a farm. So obviously you're trying to get service applications and your entire farm to communicate with online. So you're going to need the SP farm account, all right? And you're going to need federated users. Why federated users? Because you're going to need an account that can be seen in both environments. The challenge here also as well is that let's say that your company has their AD, and their AD is not representative of a UP and a user principal name or a FQDN, however you want to look at it, that can be publicly seen. Let's say it's abc.com, whereas the company is called contoso.com, right? So because, or abc.local. right? Can't be seen on the outside. So the reason why you need the federated user is because you're going to need to have, in the end, and you'll see it, a UPN, a user principal name, that can be seen from the outside, right? It needs to be tied back into the federated name that you're also going to be using for your for access on the inside. So if any of this is, the answer is no, hybrid cannot be done. All right, let's come down here and take a look now at choices you have to make. All right, we already talked about the outbound and the inbound. You need to make a decision in terms of how you want to do that. I already gave you my bias in terms of saying that if you're going to do one-way inbound, you might as well do the outbound as well because it's easy, thus giving you bidirectional. The other one is a little bit tricky. You may look at it and say, yeah, that makes sense, but there's a strong implication here. Usually when I give my demos and I do hybrid, and only in my last few did I even make it harder for myself just to drill this point home. Companies already exist. They already have their name, right? They already have a strategy in terms of how they're doing their ECM with SharePoint, right? They may have a default zone that they have stuff on, which is basically a friendly URL, right? It's not something that you can hit from the outside, but in a hybrid situation, you're going to need to have that. So a couple of things come in place, right? So one, the AD route is not a accessible route, and the UPN, right, the name that you're using to log in, is not accessible. When it comes to this site collection strategy, you may already have a website out there. Now, you may not want to go in there and re-architect your website to say, I'm going to give it now a URL that is a fully qualified domain name, an FQDN that's accessible from the outside. So here you may say, I'm going to use an alternate access mapping. I'm going to use host headers. I'm going to do something so that when it comes in, it can say, I see this from the outside. It matches to this on the inside. It's important to capture that information up front because you're going to need that for communication when SharePoint Online is trying to talk back to you on premises. It goes back into the same thing about the whether it's a new or existing web application. Maybe your choice is this. We're going to think about creating a new web app using this strategy because we want to make it easier on ourselves. These choices have consequences. One being that when you're, we haven't talked about it yet, but in the end, when you're trying to get back into your on-premises environment, you're going to need to have that web application, I said web application, but you're going to need to have a reverse proxy server. Personally, I believe the web application proxy is the best one for it. Anyone here know the web application proxy? All right, not many. It's part of Microsoft, it's Server 2012, right? If you have 2012, web application proxy is a part of it, and it is basically a reverse proxy built into the server, right? There's a published list that Microsoft says are approved, and obviously the one that they have baked in is going to be approved as well. But the experience is very easy. You can write one PowerShell script of basically 5 lines, and it will basically take your inside, take your outside, take your credential, take your certificate, and map them together and publish it just like that. Or you can go through the GUI, right? I prefer doing it through PowerShell because it gives me more control, and I know what's going on. But to bring this back home is that as a part of that publishing process, you will need to know whether you're taking your outside and putting it to a bridging URL on the inside or the FQDN or another one just to figure out how to get it from outside to inside. So the decision that you make here determines how you will publish your internal SharePoint site to the outside, right? And whether or not your identity management style, you can certainly do ADFS, Active Directory Federation Services with single sign-on, so ADFS with SSO, or you can do dir sync with password sync. And this also is an important distinction, which we'll get into a little bit later, in terms of just what you want that user experiences to be. Public domain information. These are things, again, that you want to know up front. So my public internet domain name is fabiangwilliams.com, right? The reason why this is important is that I go back, your internal may be fabian.local, right? So this is important. The IP address of the external endpoint, we'll get to that later. The external URL is also important because this is going to be your entry point into your system. This is the one link outside that you're going to publish for people going to know, which is going to be the reverse proxy side, right? So SP external or proxy.whatever.com is going to be the first entry point, and then it decides what to do. And your UPN domain suffix, as you can tell, it marries back to my public domain name, right? So these are information you need to have up front. And what this means is that if you don't already own it, you're going to need to go ahead and buy it, right? So these are choices. Maybe what you want is not there. You need to go contact, this business down the road that bought this name up and sitting on it, and they're not using it because they realize that sometime you're going to come and pay for it. It could be as simple as that, or it may just be the way your company goes about branding and name is very integral, and you need to go through a process to get that. So it's not turn on a dime. This right here also very important. So how many people here know that when SharePoint installs, there is a STS certificate that's installed with it? Everyone knows that? A couple of you guys know that? Well, no, everyone knows that. Here's a key with that. When the STS certificate is installed by a default SharePoint installation, you know what you don't get? You do not get the private key, right? You know why the private key is important? Because you're not, again, identity. You want to have SharePoint on premises to trust SharePoint online and vice versa, which means the STS cert that sits on side of your on-premises server needs to be seen by online. So you're going to have to export that certificate. What do you need to export it? You're going to need a key. You're going to need a password to be able to do that. So again, the process is really easy. You basically run a PowerShell script and you change that and you re-register it to an existing SharePoint. So it's not that hard. You don't have to redo SharePoint. You basically create a new certificate, remove your old one, put the new one in, and it works. It can be a little bit daunting because if it goes wrong, it can go wrong, right? But this is what you would do. You capture all of this information up front. Expiration dates are key. Do you know what happens if the certificate is expired and you have not get a new certificate? Errors in SharePoint, right? Sometimes it may be as simple as you say this site is not trusted anymore, or the certificate chain cannot be validated. But in the case of hybrid, it is the most troublesome to troubleshoot because the errors, you have no idea where it's erroring out sometimes. It could be erroring out on the call being made to the proxy. It could be to the ADFS server. It could be towards this certificate. It's hard to troubleshoot. Has anyone here ever tried to troubleshoot certificates before? Is it easy? It's not easy at all. All right, certificates and SPNs, very hard. Service principal names. The next thing is SSL certificate. So besides your own, and by the way, the STS cert is a cert on your own computer. So you can create that certificate. It's not going to cost you money. This one, on the other end, is going to cost you money, all right? So you're going to have to go out there and, because, well, for one thing, Microsoft doesn't support it, but I would also, even if they didn't support it, I would not encourage anyone to do hybrid over HTTP, right? You want it HTTPS, all right? So because of that, you're going to spend the money and you're going to buy some certificates from a trusted authority. There's some things about this. I have my own biases, and I'm going to share it with you. You can challenge me on that, call me on my stuff, and ask me why I do it this way, and I'll explain it to you. But there are two different types of ways you can purchase certificates, right? You can purchase certificates either a SAN cert or a wildcard cert, right? Those are two different ways right there. When you're doing hybrid, or when you're working with certificates, even in general, but especially with hybrid, and you have servers that could be undetermined at the time because you don't know how you're going to scale, right? You may say, I want to start off with 2 web front ends. I want to start off with my SharePoint box. I want my workflow servers over here and my SQL servers over here. So, I need 5 boxes. They have these names. If you say you want a SAN cert, do you know what you need? You need the name of all of these servers, right? Because your certificate needs to be bound to the name of the server, right? Now, SAN certs are way, way cheaper than wildcard certs. But the other problem that you're going to get into as well is, let's say that you want to add another server, right? And you have a SAN cert. Do you know what you need to do? Send back in a CSR, which is a certificate request, with that change, get back a new certificate, pull down all your certificate, push those certificates up just to add one, right? So it could be a matter of convenience why you may want to do a wildcard cert. I choose to do a wildcard cert. I pay extra money just for certificates just because I don't want the problem that will come by if I don't have that. The challenge with wildcard cert, again, you're going to think wildcard cert is a bed of roses. It's not a bed of roses either, right? It comes with its own experiences and challenges as well. One, if you're working with provider-hosted applications within your SharePoint environment and you're trying to work with wildcard certs, provider-hosted application sometimes doesn't like the fact that you have a star.domainname.com. So you have that challenge as well. I was doing a session, again, it was a tech ed last year, where I was doing a hybrid session, and I was also doing a provider-hosted session. And I was trying to use the same certificate twice. Now, even though it was a different name, but it just errored out, and a very smart guy named Steve Peshka came and told me why, and it was because I was using a wildcard certificate for provider-hosted app. So this part right here, which is asking about the web application SSL certificate, is also important because depending on if you choose a SANS cert or not, you may need to have this, but because I'm using a wildcard cert, I don't need to have that. Just checking my time. So this becomes a moot point for me because I'm using a wildcard cert. The decision that I made before in terms of the fact that I'm using alternate access mapping makes this also moot. And it makes this also moot. And then now we're down to here. So because I'm using alternate access mappings in terms of the way my on-premises is going to look like, these are some of the questions that are important when I'm talking about, remember I talked about bridging URL? This is the questions that you're going to need to answer when you're publishing your SharePoint site through web application proxy or whatever proxy server you're going to be talking about. And I have, you can see I have one name there. And so that's my internal name. This is my FQDN. Because this is more reflective of what a real world example is going to be like. Because nobody's going to think ahead of time, hey, I need hybrid 10 years ago, right? So they didn't have the forethought of thinking I need to get something that's publicly accessible. So you could make that decision. The other piece is secure store, right? The communication between service application in a hybrid scenario is done through secure store credentials. More specifically, it's done through secure store credentials using a certificate because secure store can do username, password. It can also do certificates. The way BCS or even search works is that you basically have a certificate on your on-premises side inside your secure store. You're going to export that certificate and import it on the SharePoint Online side, and that, again, is what? What's the word I'm looking for? Starts with an I. Trusted communicate, but starts with an I. Identity, right? So this is the complexity that you have about identity. Again, I hope this doesn't hammer in home. All of these choices will come up in terms of just affecting how you move forward. And besides that, that is the end of this document. But as you can see, it's a very, very important document that you want to get right. Or even if you need to adjust later on, you can come back to this document and see the implication of making those adjustments. Any questions on the document? Confused? Ask questions then. Any questions? Come on.
For multiple forest domains, is there any recommended method for matching identity, like bringing multiple identities into the cloud?
Yes, there is. It's a very long answer, so let me take that one offline. All right, but if anyone wants to listen to me, I'll come in over the corner and answer it right there because that's a complex. Because multi-forest now is single domain multi-forest or multi-forest. Yeah. You understand it's going to be a complex answer. All right, we'll tackle that later. So we're already stepped through the worksheet. Let's look about the on-premise environment now. So reinforcing how my lab scenario opportunity is not reflective of a real production environment. My on-premises is in Azure. I'm using VMs, but this can be anywhere, as we mentioned before. In my scenario, I'm running a domain controller that has DirSync on there as well, a SQL Server, a SharePoint box, and an ADFS box. I have an AD with a UPN suffix of fabianlab.com, which you saw before, which is definitely not my public one, so making it real world. I'm registering my fabianwilliams.com with a wildcard cert as well. And I have an E3 tenant in Office 365. I'll say it right now before I forget it. If you have an E1 tenant, you can only do search outbound. But any E2, E3, and E4 above, you can do both, any different type of hybrid. So this is my environment having my boxes in Azure, all right? And this is what I had to run my Azure environment. This is my Active Directory environment, as you can see, fabianlab.com. What I want to point out here is that I have a OU, an organizational unit called Fabian Lab SharePoint Users. All right? This, again, is a decision point, obviously, because when you're working with, the idea here is to create federated users, right? And also to have a way for DirSync to figure out who to send to the cloud to synchronize so that people can have access through hybrid, all right? Why is this important? I'm going to reinforce it later, but I'm going to say it now, is that DirSync does not care who the users are that it's sending to the cloud, all right? And it'll send everyone indiscriminately. Hey, just send them, all right? The one thing you have to do to make this work, to make hybrid work and have people to log on inside the Office 365 environment is that even though it sends them there, it'll say that they have no licenses. So you have to apply licenses online for all of the users that you send up. You'll see that piece as well in my demo. So by having an OU or a container to really regulate the people that you want is good. Because then what I can do now is I can do a filter inside my Dursing tool and say, only look for this OU inside my AD and only do these people, all right? So that's one reason to do it. These are some of the service applications that you'll have on your on-premises side that you want to surface to the other side. I'm going to go to a demo because I'll explain it a lot quicker. So I'm just going to bring up a demo. Again, this is a recording. It's all queued up. Hopefully my volume is correct. And let me back up a little bit and start. Going to be registering the domain with Office 365. We're going to be going. This is going to be one of our exhaustive demos here. It's going to be configuring our identity on premises, setting up the DIR sync and password sync, and then we're actually going to do a federation. I'm going to show you a couple tips and tricks in this to ensure that we get smooth sailing along the way and only get the users that we want, and tying all of this thing that we've learned so far together. Okay, I think it's time that we can take a look now to see what's inside our Active Directory in our on-premises environment. What you see here is our DC, domain controller. We have a domain called fabianslab.com. Understanding the fact that this is not going to be the public UPN or the public UPN suffix tied to our publicly accessible domain name, which is a part of our wildcard certificates that will be making that glue between our on-premises environment or SharePoint environment where this domain is going to be registered, and also with our federated users and our certificates for all our other servers. So the first thing that we will do is we'll look and see that we have a where are these Fabian Lab SP users, Alpha Bravo and Charlie Foxtrot. We take a look at these guys right now. Underneath their account, you'll see that there's only fabianlab.com. All right. The next thing that we need to do, and we'll just do it right now because it doesn't take that long to do, is let's go ahead and create that UPN suffix. So we'll go to Properties. We'll do fabiangwilliams.com and do Add. Apply, OK. And now when we go back into AD users, what we will do, at least for these users, and the reason why we have them also in a separate organizational unit is because we're going to be using DirSync to synchronize these accounts with what's inside Office 365. And we can do filters based on OUs, and that will allow me not to get all of these other users and groups as well. So back to these users. Let's go, and I will create a few more here to make a distinction between some of the users that are going to be pulled across and users that are not. So we'll go back to Properties again. We go back to Account, and now when we do this, we will see the other UPN, and this is tying to the public fabiangwilliams.com wildcard certificate, and also the UPN that is going to be attached to the hybrid environment. fabiangwilliams.com as the registered domain. So we'll do an OK, and we do the same thing for this guy as well. Change that to this. And this is going to play a huge role when we actually do the user profile services synchronization. It'll actually pull that user over using that UPN, and then when we are now trying to authenticate the user through a claims process, the email or the UPN of that user is what's going to be validated, so everything will tie back to the fabiangwilliams.com. So the next thing, let's go ahead and talk about the O365. Let's go to Office 365.
let us look at what's there so far, poke around and show you a couple of things.
In fact, I'm going to pause right here. I'm going to pick back up in a few minutes when I talk about identity. So let me just jump out of here and come back to the slides and start from here. Any questions on that part so far?
Is there a restriction on the AD version, AD services?
2008, yes, exactly. Yes. Good question. Thank you very much. So when we talk about identity, we saw a piece of it right there. The piece of it right there is managing the on-premises experience. The first thing you need to understand, which hopefully all of you know, is that SharePoint is not an identity management system. It does not maintain users. It goes to Active Directory to get those users, right? So actually, there's your answer right there. It's in the text, the 2008 functional level, all right? You also need to access the internet. So you're going to need a FQDN that can get back on the inside. You're also going to need a cloud presence. So you're going to need to have an SPO, and I mentioned before about the E1 and the fact that E2, 3, and 4 will support all of the hybrid scenarios. And you're going to have an on-premises environment as well. So you need to have that set up. And identity is key, and we're going to get into certificates later on. The next thing is that if you're doing single sign-on with ADFS, you're going to need an on-premises box that also has ADFS built on there. And again, minimum version needs to be 2.0. You're going to need to have a computer running DirSync. And DirSync for a while could not be ran on a DC. Now you can actually have your DirSync on your DC machine. Whether you want to or not, it's up to you. But it's one less box to manage, especially if you're inside Azure. It's a less box to get in terms of a VM and a compute cycle. STS cert that comes with SharePoint does not have a private key. We spoke about that before. So this is the reason why you need to have that. And you need to have federated users as well. Now, this comes back to the thing I wanted to talk about. I spent a little bit of time. I'm going to use this slide because I know we're running out of time. I want to make sure we capture everything. It's about the experience, and it's also about policy or procedures. In all of my demos, I always do single sign-on with ADFS. And I'm not going to. You can read this. So while I'm talking, take a look at that. But the key differentiator is if you're using ADFS, you have the single sign-on experience because there's a token that's been issued by the ADFS server, and that token will follow you everywhere you go. So let's say that you log in for the first time. It says, who are you? There's no cached login for you. I have no token. There's no refresh token. I want to make a call to the ADFS box. The ADFS box is going to call to the AD box. Do you know who this person is? Yes, I know who this person is. Issue them this token. It comes back to you, and whatever resource you're trying to get, it says, okay, who are you? Oh, I have a token. I trust that token. Here you go. Right? And if you want to touch anything else, you don't need to log back in. So that's the experience part, right? The experience is that once you authenticate for the first time, don't be asking the user to authenticate again, whether they're on premises or they're inside the cloud. So the ADFS gives you that. Now, if you don't want to do ADFS, you can certainly do DirSync with password sync. The challenge with that is that some people do not want to have password synchronization because they don't trust it. And it's not an SSO experience, right? Because even though your password is synced, it's not a token, right? So yes, you may, if you log in to the browser and say, remember me, it'll remember you as long as that session is active. The session is no longer active, doesn't remember you. Maybe if you have an IE window open somewhere else where you've logged in and then you never close that window and you keep going to others, it'll remember you, right? But it's not a true experience. Also, some people get scared about the first one where they say, oh, password sync. But it's actually an immutable hash that's done. So it's not really moving your password. It's actually making a hash of the password and synchronizing the hash itself. So it is secure. But some people really get iffy about it. And me working in the States, that's a no-no. You can't have password sync. So you have to go the other route. Okay. So with that, let's come back in and catch back up here.
Under domains, since we mentioned that we will be federating, you'll notice that fabianjwilliams.com is already a registered domain. The setup is already complete. And as far as users, and where are those users again? Up top, users, active users. Pay no mind to the fact that this already is registered to fabianjwilliams.com. This is not tied to the Alpha or Bravo. This is just, I can do this because the domain's already registered, but this is a cloud. You will basically come here to do that. I've already done that just to take a little bit of the waiting out for you. You can see that there's already there. So what I'm going to do now is I've already done that. I've already verified the domain. You see me do that. I'm going to activate this tool. So activating DirSync allows you to copy users, security groups, and so on and so forth. So we've already done the necessary things to do that by creating that federated UPN. Active Directory is now, synchronous is now active. And now it's going to pull down the
download the tool.
Not being able to
All right,
install.
just moving fast a little bit for
we
you.
probably will not
5
go
minutes.
through all the configuration credentials for.
I'm gonna stop here for a little bit. When you use this tool, that's just in the interest of time. I know we have like 5 minutes. So the reason why I had to also record this is because once I've done it once, I can't undo it. So that's the problem with hybrid. You're committed. It's a one-way street going in. I can't say, oh well, let's get rid of all these users and redo it over. No, I'd have to redo the certificates and pull it out and pull it back in. So I have my domain. I register it with Office 365, but and then it's tied in. And now I'm using DirSync, and I'm going to tell DirSync now to look at the top one here. Says Windows Azure Active Directory credentials. Remember, I told you you're going to need that. Active Directory credentials, that's the one on premises. Whether you want hybrid deployment or password synchronization and so on and so on. These are the questions that you were asked before in your questionnaire. So if you need to have it.
And with that complete now, it's telling us about some features of the Windows Azure Active Directory. So you want to check into that. Those people inside the connector. Double click on it.
What's happening here is
And
I'm
then you go
opening
to
up
configure partition,
DirSync.
which is tied,
And I am using the tool to come inside here, and I am going to go ahead and filter inside my container to just pick the one OU that I want that have my users so that it doesn't pull in that information. By default, when you run the tool, it's going to want to sync immediately. Of course, tell it no, and then come back inside here and do some refinements.
Coming from, so it won't pull in.
All right.
The users
With
group
that,
which has the,
let's come back over
and
here.
Basically, this just says sync to Active Directory rather than.
Let me pause right here. As you can see, Alpha Bravo Charlie Foxtrot says synced with AD. So that one. So when I ran my sync, it synced and it pulls that in. There's another thing that's over here on the side that says it's going to say activate licenses.
So that they
Activate synced users, because by default they're not activated. So this is now where you have to make a decision. How many people am I doing, because you only have X amount of users and you're charged per user on Microsoft for these licenses, all right? So with that, let me bounce out of that and let me come back to my deck, and we're wrapping up here. We only have like 8 more slides, but they're really fast slides from current slides. Go ahead.
On the DirSync, can you filter out disabled users and stuff like that?
Yes, you can write queries to do that. Yeah. So the review process is this is now tied back into the on-premises side. So obviously you're going to need to have user profile services turned on with synchronization, and the reason why the UPN is important before is because the UPN users are inside there. Obviously, it may be more than this, but you want to capture that because those users inside SharePoint will have the right UPN, and they're going to be able to log into SharePoint and see both sides. So these are my users, and as you can see here, they don't have the FabianLab.com email UPN anymore. They have this one. So the gotcha that most people do is that they synchronize their user and synchronize the wrong one. So it is the right person, but it's the wrong UPN, and it doesn't work. And these are all of my services accounts that I'm doing. I'm doing search and BCS. So hopefully this helps. Contact me on Twitter if you're not already. Ask me any questions you want. I'm here for more. Come to my session tomorrow about Xamarin and iOS and cool stuff with mobile, Azure Mobile Services. Thank you very much for coming.